releasing to the public video from a brazen jewelry store robbery in hopes they can catch these crooks. Rick has more for us. Rick?
Well, John, police in Philly really need the public's help, so they're putting this surveillance video back out there, hoping that somebody can identify these thieves who ripped off a jewelry store last month. The suspects were armed. They walked into this store. They forced 3 employees into a back office, and then they proceeded to remove trays of jewelry from the counter and also from a safe. And you can see them backing the employees into that back office. They shut the door then, and they went to work. An off-duty police officer happened to spot the thieves as they were walking away after the robbery. He followed them to their car, a green Ford Contour, but then he eventually lost sight of them, and they were able to get away. So if you have any information, if you know who these guys are, and you can get a pretty good look at them on this surveillance video, you are asked to please call the police in Philadelphia or call 911. And there's the tip line for the Philadelphia Police Department, 215-686-TIPS. And you can give your information anonymously. Back to you.
Yeah, let's hope they catch those guys. Rick, thank you.
And now that the latest polls show Ron Paul has a good chance of winning Iowa, his Republican rivals are spending more time pointing out Paul's record, especially when it comes to national security and foreign policy. Jack Hunter is an advisor to the Paul campaign and a conservative commentator. He writes a column for the Charleston City paper in South Carolina. Jack, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Well, of course, you know, when you're on top, all people are gunning for you. And one of the things that Congressman Paul's critics are claiming that he has really weak foreign policy issues and a very almost dangerous take on how to handle those situations. Wendell Goler just reported, as you know, there is a tenuous situation happening right now with Iran where Ahmadinejad is basically threatening to strangle the Strait of Hormuz, basically blocking the passageway to 20% of the world's oil supplies. And he's saying, look, Washington, you put more sanctions on our oil production, or our oil exports, I should say, and this is what's going to happen. So I ask you, if Congressman Paul were president today, how would he handle that?
Well, if Congressman Paul were President Paul, we'd have the strongest national defense in the world. A nation like Iran would be no threat to the United States because we would remain the world's most powerful military superpower in the world. Now, a lot of people, as you point out, are sort of asking questions about...
Excuse me, how would you remain the most powerful military force in the world when I know that Congressman Paul, one of the things that he says that you need to rein in military spending?
Well, that's exactly right. What Congressman Paul points out is that we need to cut spending in this country to turn around the economy. The difference between Paul and the other Republican presidential candidates, he does, as you just noted, addresses Pentagon spending. His budget, his plan, the first year, which cuts $1 trillion.
Mr. Hunter,
cuts $1 trillion, does address Pentagon spending.
A lot. We've heard that, and that's not what I asked you specifically. I wanted to ask you about this story that's in the news today, and you're here as a surrogate for the congressman, and I wanted to know specifically, seeing that his critics are claiming that he's weak and perhaps dangerous on foreign policy, I want to know how you would handle this tenuous situation that's taking place right now.
Well, any potential threat that Iran would actually pose to the United States or our interests in that region would be met. The question we're asking, you're not framing the question correctly, are our interests at risk? And that's the question we don't ask often enough. That's what we didn't ask going into the Iraq war. And that's where people are starting to overreact now. That's been Paul's point the whole time, that we might overreact.
The question right now is not, are our interests at risk? The question is, as you know, Ahmadinejad is right now showing and flexing his muscle as he always does. And Congressman Paul is on record saying that, so what if Iran has nukes? This guy is dangerous. And that is part of what his critics are saying, that he needs to be more, have a better, more realistic attitude and approach to handling Iran.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, is that the way you're framing the question, and some of the other Republican candidates, and even this president, to what degree is Iran dangerous? To what degree is Ahmadinejad a danger to the United States? These are the questions we do not ask often enough.
Well, is he
during the Cold War, Ronald Reagan faced down a military superpower in the Soviet Union with thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at us in our backyard in Cuba. Does Iran equal that sort of threat? No, not at all. That's what President President Paul, that's how he would handle it. That's what Congressman Paul is saying. We need to measure these things and have a sober, realistic, more prudent foreign policy than we've had in the past, not only because it's better for America's national security, but we can't afford to keep doing what we're doing.
Okay,
with Paul's budget, we would still have the largest military in the world, 4 times larger than China, and a larger budget than when Bush had in 2005.
Excuse me. All the points that you're making, apparently they're resonating there in Iowa, but they're resonating with the young voters, the independent voters, and the Democratic voters. So I ask you, how do you maintain the momentum that you have there going in Iowa? And perhaps because Congressman Paul is a different candidate who doesn't think like the typical Republican he doesn't maintain the specific or traditional Republican position. How does he maintain the momentum beyond Iowa? And perhaps because he is different, maybe this works in his favor. I don't know. You tell me.
That's where you really hit upon something. Ron Paul's been saying the same thing for decades. Why are we doing so well in Iowa? Why are we doing so well in New Hampshire? Because we've been doing the same thing. The same candidate, Ron Paul, that so many said couldn't get above 10% is now well above that and a front runner. And that's true across the board. What's going to be our game plan? To keep doing what we've always been doing. Honesty sells. The Republican grassroots, the voters out there, recognize integrity. Somebody who has a record to back it up. You know, watching guys like Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney argue over who's the bigger conservative or better conservative is sort of like watching the 2 guys in Milli Vanilli argue over who's a better singer. It does not hold water. And when they see Ron Paul, they see consistent conservatism.
I do have to leave it there on the Milli Vanilli note. Jack Hunter, thank you very much for sticking in with the discussion. Thank you very much.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
At least for those who know, they were a lip-syncing